Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Health Law Career Panel. We have 4 very awesome panelists here today. Hopefully you got my email with all their bios so you can see what their background's in. Moderating is going to be Professor Tenenbaum, and I'll let you take it away. Oh, and also if you have questions, you can put them in the chat box, or you can use the raise hand feature. Does everyone know how to do that? I hope so by now.
All right. Hi, everyone. I thought that we would start by having each of our panelists give some background information on what they're doing now, and perhaps if they want to give you a little bit of information on something they thought was particularly interesting in their past. And so I'll just start off. Maybe we just go in alphabetical order. All right. So Wahid, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name, and I should have asked you when we were waiting. Is it Bouyan?
Bouyan, yes. I wasn't sure if you're going to go with my first name or last name for alphabetical. So
Okay.
First or last. Okay, so I am currently general counsel at a telemedicine substance use disorder treatment program. And so for me, it has been quite busy with COVID, since telemedicine and telehealth is smack dab in the center of all of the virtual care transition right now. And it's quite interesting because it is a startup, and it's about 2 years old. And right prior to COVID being announced, we were actually at the tail end of getting Series A financing, which is heavy with corporate work, lots of due diligence, lots of financial docs and all that stuff. And then our Series A financer bailed on us, saying like, oops, not gonna happen. We don't know if telemedicine is gonna actually make it right now. COVID is a hit and things are falling apart. I'm like, really? And so on one end, we're getting really busy because suddenly everybody wants to use the service. On the other end, we're like, where are we gonna get the money? So it's been quite crazy. I wear multiple hats at this organization. I'm GC compliance as well as privacy officer. And at this time we're recruiting for every single department. So I'm acting as semi-recruiter for some of these roles and departments. Prior to this organization, I worked at another behavioral health, telehealth organization as well. It was called Able2. Able2 was acquired earlier this year, right around the time of the pandemic being announced as well. And my background actually is in healthcare IT. I didn't take healthcare or IT classes in law school. When I was there, I think there was only one class in healthcare that was being offered, unless you were in the bioinformatics route, I believe. And so I took one class. It was primarily on ERISA, and my work doesn't cover it, but I learned a lot and how complicated it was, and how I wanted to learn more. So after law school, I originally planned on going towards tax and employment, but I decided to let me not go towards that route and go towards healthcare and the digital side of it, because it was growing. While I was in law school, a law called high tech was passed. And so there weren't many attorneys who were interpreting it, and I figured this is probably going to be a hot area. So I just dove in. I interned, volunteer. I had 3 jobs at once just to figure out what's happening here, and got picked up by the government. I was in a program on healthcare IT, where I really learned the clinical side as well as the tech side of it. And then from there, really connected a lot with a lot of business leaders and regulatory government leaders that helped me where I am. So I'm in telemedicine right now. I feel like for the last 6 years, I've been in telemedicine. So I think I'm a telemedicine lawyer. I don't know. But specific to substance use disorder, primarily, and behavioral health.
Thank you so much. I guess we'll wait for questions. Jessica, you have any particular preference here? No, wait for questions till the end, or we taking questions the whole time?
We can take them during, if you have questions during, if something comes up.
All right, so I think we'll wait for all the panelists to give their introductions, then we'll take questions, and then we'll go on to the next question. Thank you. All right. So next is, I guess we're using first names. That's great. Daniel.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? You can just nod since you're all muted. Okay, cool. I graduated Albany Law back in 2009. I worked at two different firms before where I am currently. So I worked at a small boutique firm doing background healthcare regulatory. I then went on to a big Connecticut firm and basically started the healthcare practice group there, and represented hospitals and small medical practices. I'm at Northwell Health, which for some of you, people know it as like Lenox Hill Hospital plus 22 other hospitals. So it's the largest employer in New York. We got about 75,000 employees, and I'm one of 40 lawyers over there. The work that I get to do, I get to wear a ton of hats as well, but I'd say more than half my work is doing every business deal possible for our laboratories. New York State had what was known as like a DSRIP program, which is like a pink elephant. It's basically a program designed to keep people out of the hospital and figure out what kind of community-based services can better service their needs. It was a $900 million operation for Northwell. I was the main lawyer for that. I also, we do about $12 million of investments or joint ventures with startup companies. One of three lawyers that handles those kinds of arrangements. And then in the past year, I've actually gotten involved on the business side of healthcare, and working with operations and our strategic planning office, and figuring out ways to expand the current footprint of Northwell. I find that I enjoy thinking about business or using the law degree to do the business aspects of an organization. So I got to wear many hats, and it's a lot of fun.
Thank you very much. Pooja?
Hi. Hi, everybody. So I graduated in 15. Right out of law school, I was working at a big firm in the city, New York City, and I was doing mostly workers' comp. But when I graduated with the joint degree in bioethics. So I always knew that I wanted to do health law. I got offered a position back up here in Albany with the New York State Department of Health in 16. So I moved back up here, and I've been with them ever since. I've had two positions within the Department of Health. Initially, I was with something called the Bureau of Health Insurance Programs. And what I did there was advise our program staff on how to enforce various parts of the law. So we had probably about 6 attorneys in that bureau, and each attorney had a special area. So mine was transportation, so anything to do with ambulance services, that type of stuff. Then I went over to the Office of Professional Medical Conduct, and that's where I've been ever since. What I do there is prosecute physicians and physician assistants on their medical licenses. So anything under the education law or the public health law. It varies from having a conviction already, like for healthcare fraud, to essentially the licensing side of a medical malpractice claim. So if they could have parallel suits going on, so they could have a civil suit where it's medical malpractice going on, and they essentially wait for our side to finish first. And that would be, negligence, proving negligence, incompetence, that sort of stuff. And that's literally all I do right now. And I think that's it.
Thank you. And David?
Thank you, Professor. Well, I'm probably a little bit older than the other panelists here. I graduated Albany Law School in 1990. There's Jessica cracking the smile at that. And I've been at work. I've worked many years for the government, state, local, different capacities. I won't bore you with my background, but I'll hopefully not bore you with what I do on a day-to-day basis now. I'm a senior partner at a law firm in Albany, and we have a health law department, which contains about 10 lawyers whose focus is virtually always health law. Every once in a while, we'll handle a case outside of that, but for the most part, we are all 100% occupied with health law. So my practice is a little bit broader than most. I do virtually anything that has anything to do with Medicaid, Medicare, private insurance, any audit, any investigation, any recoupment, any attempted take back of money. There's a lot of money in healthcare that we all know, but sort of behind the scenes, what most people don't see is there's a lot of pressure on providers to give that money back by various payors, either federal healthcare programs or private insurers. Everybody's in this game of trying to get the money back. So I do a lot of compliance work, regulatory interpretation, lots of self-disclosures. When people come forward and say, hey, I received these payments in error, I want to give them back. We have a number of clients that do a lot of self-disclosures, and one of the benefits is when the government recognizes that you're a person that's prone to return money, they don't waste their time auditing you. They don't waste their time investigating you because, frankly, you're doing their work for them. So it's always been an interesting experience trying to convince the clients that this is the right thing to do. I mean, the law requires you to do it. If you do it, you're not going to be audited. In fact, it's the opposite. You'll be trusted by the government. We do a lot of enrollment denial appeals. A lot of folks are excluded in part because of OPMC action. They're excluded from the Medicaid program in the state. We handle those appeals. A big part of my practice are what's called False Claims Act cases. And you've probably learned about those in your coursework, but we've handled a few of those, one quite large case, in fact. And we do white collar criminal defense. And our goal primarily there is to keep our client from getting criminally charged. You can't always prevent that from happening, but in many instances with an aggressive defense, you can show the government that they are mistaken in that they think that your client may have the actual intent to commit various offenses, when the reality is it just was not an orchestrated effort and the result of people being overworked and short-staffed in the billing department, and everybody can go home and nobody's going to jail. People are going to pay a lot of money back, but the idea is to keep your client from being incarcerated. I do have a criminal prosecution background. I've also done criminal defense, so that comes in handy. There aren't a lot of healthcare lawyers that have that background. So I do some anti-kickback statute cases. I'm working on one now that's a self-disclosure with the OIG in the Southern District of New York. I do very little Stark law work. I find it amazingly complicated in many instances. And it's just, you read these opinions and it takes you 2 hours to get through one. And you think, wow, I could really make some serious mistakes here because of the complexity. So I leave that to other younger folks who seem to enjoy perusing through OIG opinions till all hours of the night. We do some Article 78 cases, some in healthcare, some are not in healthcare, but we're very busy. And I do want to acknowledge 2 law clerks that we've had recently. One is Colleen Pearson. Hi, Colleen. And Jessica Haller, your host. Excellent law clerks, and we really enjoy working with them. And that's one of the best parts of my job, is to get, to meet young law students and young lawyers and to try to mentor them. And it's really rewarding, and we get almost all our folks from Albany Law School, so we really appreciate that.
Thank you, Dave. He teaches us a lot.
So thank you. I was going to say the same. And also I noticed that you work for OMIG and Mafuku. So I get a lot of questions from students about the Inspector General's office and doing Medicaid fraud prosecutions. So I was wondering if you could tell the students just a little bit about that also.
Sure. I was the acting head of the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General for Governor Pataki, and then short-lived Governor Spitzer. But I left early in Spitzer's term and went to work for O'Connell and Aronowitz. So I've been there about 13 years. I never did formally work for the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, but I worked with them a lot when I was at the OMIG. We would send them a lot of referrals. So the OMIG likes to say that it's fighting fraud, waste, and abuse, and that's true. But really, when they encounter a fraud case, they don't really have any jurisdiction, because that case, by a memorandum of understanding between the Department of Health, the OMIG, and the Attorney General's office, is supposed to be referred to the Attorney General's office for criminal investigation. So when you have a fraud case, it means you believe, or it appears to be, that there's some intentional conduct, not just recklessness, not just erroneous billing, but a pattern that suggests the conduct is intentional. So that matter is supposed to be immediately referred to the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. And at any given time, there's probably 1 to 300 cases that has been referred that are pending, and they work their way through the Attorney General's office. I also work for the Attorney General's office, but in environmental protection, and I did some criminal work there as well. So I can just tell you there are a lot of cases in the hopper. They do have a lot of lawyers, they do have a lot of investigators, but there's so many matters that are being investigated. It takes a long time for these to be resolved. And like now I do a lot of defense work for targets of the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit, investigators. And they keep us busy. You know, they show up at the facility, 4:20 in the afternoon on a Friday, and they want patient records by 5 o'clock. I mean, that's what you're dealing with, and you have to be available, you have to be responsive, and you want to bait stamp everything that goes out so you can identify each page of every document that has been provided to the government. There's a lot of abuse and neglect investigations in nursing homes, and our firm is general counsel to the New York State Health Facilities Association, which is the statewide organization of for-profit nursing homes. So we get a lot of activity from NISHFA and their members. And the Attorney General's office, they're very aggressive. The Attorney General is elected statewide, so you can imagine it's about press releases, it's about public perception, the sentinel effect. Like the more you do, the more you identify. In theory, the more you deter, and the less fraud that you have, because people are afraid of getting caught and prosecuted by the Attorney General or the federal government or whomever might be prosecuting. So it's a very robust practice. There usually aren't enough hours in the day, but that's preferable from the opposite, where you don't have enough hours to work in a day. So it's enjoyable. It really helps to have a criminal defense background, but it is by no means necessary. Most of it is document review, going through patient records, seeing what the potential problems might be. Very time consuming, but you don't need to be F. Lee Bailey or Clarence Darrow to do any of that. So I see virtually no one but Professor Tannenbaum recognizes those names, right? Okay, I'll stop talking.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that background. Anybody have any questions before I move on to the next area? All right, I don't see any hands, so I'll just keep going here. What do you wish you had known about this field, or the field that you're currently working in, before you started working, right? In other words, if you were a student right now, what do you wish that you had known? What should the students know about what they should find out right before they enter their chosen field? And we'll start again with Wahida.
So whether it is, I had some background in this already, but I believe this is necessary for all students in law school, whatever industry that you end up in, whether it's healthcare, IP, tech, corporate, whatever it is an understanding of balance sheets and the financial aspects, especially whether it's a business or maybe you'll be your own attorney and you have your own firm. Understanding balance sheets, the P&L side of it, cost to acquire, and where things go. Because in a business setting, oftentimes I've noticed many times the attorneys that I work with, they just glaze over this, but then it impacts the legal budget or the legal operations or other parts and other departments, and the interplay of how things work and what the bonuses are going to be, what the revenues are going to be, all that. So I think if there are any classes right now at Albany Law School taking a course on that, and if there aren't, taking a course on the side at some of these online education courses like Coursera, EDX. I've still been doing that at times where, even though I don't really have much time, I still might take one or two just workshops or courses on something that I feel like I might need a small refresher in, so that way I could still fully participate and engage with my business partners. So I think some business understanding and a bit more business acumen before you go in, because you're going to be, let's say you're working at a law firm, you're going to be representing your clients. You need to understand what their main concerns are, what their bottom line is, and how things work. And having that understanding will help you represent them better too, and connect with them.
Thank you very much. Daniel?
Just having a great conversation with myself. What do I wish I knew? I mean, what he had talked about is 100% accurate. It's important to have an appreciation of the financials. But if I'm a law student, at Albany Law, I concentrated in healthcare law, and I took a bunch of healthcare courses, and I knew Stark and anti-kickback and HIPAA from a student's perspective when leaving the school. If I were to do it again, I would be looking to get exposure across the healthcare industry. Figure out ways to have opportunities to get exposure in managed care. Maybe you want to go into health insurance, get exposure to pharmaceutical. Maybe you want to do work with AstraZeneca or GlaxoSmithKline. See if there's a way to work with in a government setting. Learn about how the authorities try to clamp down on the rest of us. If I were to do it again, I think I would take a broader approach to the healthcare industry, knowing full well that once I get out in the world, my goal is to focus, is to become an expert in one or two topics after experiencing most of the others. I guess that's what I would have done differently.
Thank you. Yeah, as I say in my health law classes, right, my job is to give you a big overview, right, because that's what's much harder to get in practice, is a general overview of the law in the healthcare field, and it helps to have that overview. By the way, I also want to tell students we now, actually as of yesterday, the faculty approved another course on physician self-referral and Stark Law, and we do have an online course on the False Claim Act. It's a 1-credit course. So if any of you wanted to take that course, it's now available to law students. All right, and now Pooja.
Hi again. So my advice is probably going to be a little bit more broad. Something that I've noticed throughout my short 5 years since graduation is that law is very much a collaborative field. Doesn't matter if you're in a private firm or you're in the government. If you're someone that has so far gone through law school, kind of staying independent, I can assure you the working field is not like that. So right now, even though I'm at OPMC and, we each have our own individual cases, things overlap with other parts of the Department of Health and other parts of the state, whether it's the Attorney General's office, whether it's downstairs in litigation. So I guess my advice would be something that I wish I would have known, or that I didn't realize, is that as much as you want to be independent as possible, it's not good to like pigeonhole yourself in one thing. So like Daniel said, to get as much experience as possible and broad broaden your horizons, so to speak. And then another thing that I wish I had known to do better is billing. When I was at the private firm, billing was probably the biggest shock to me, keeping track of those 6-minute increments. So that's really all I have to contribute to this question, but thank you.
Thanks, Pooja. David?
Sure. This is a great question. And I guess my answer is I wish I had known how great the field was before I realized it, because I didn't start out wanting to be a healthcare lawyer. I mean, I started out wanting to be a prosecutor. And while I was in law school, a cousin of mine was killed by a drunk driver in a head-on collision. And sure enough, what did I do? I became a DWI prosecutor. Like, how things shape your career are very interesting. But I knew I wanted to go to court. I knew I wanted to do trials and hearings. And I did that. And the workload was just amazingly intense. Very gratifying, but you're working around the clock. Police officers are calling you in the middle of the night. Judges are calling you in the middle of the night for search warrants and things. And it's exciting, but it really is a game for the younger among us. So after a while, I knew I wanted to do something a little bit more laid back. I mean, not to say that, anything that I've done since has been laid back, but in comparison, it's been laid back. I decided I wanted to be an environmental lawyer. And I went to Washington on an internship. I worked on the Exxon Valdez oil spill while I was in law school. And I also worked for the Attorney General's Environmental Protection Bureau. And I said, well, maybe I'll give that a shot. Well, that really didn't get me very far. There were not that many jobs around, particularly in the Albany area. The big cases were Superfund, toxic waste cleanups, which involve millions and millions of dollars going to lawyers and not so many dollars going to the cleanup. So that kind of a thing was an eye-opening experience. But in the end, and I wound up getting into the Medicaid program almost by accident. I mean, I knew I wanted to do administrative law. I knew I wanted to work for a regulatory agency. So I went to the Office of Alcoholism and Substance Abuse Services, where I found myself designing an entire regulatory structure involving Medicaid reimbursement, providing services, at taxpayer expense for chemical dependence, abuse, addiction, that sort of thing. And it was fascinating. It was like a door had opened, and I got to see this whole inner workings of how a state tries to regulate providers, how insurance companies try to regulate providers. And this whole business about Medicaid reimbursement, like that's a whole world of regulatory oversight. And so I got in there and I was like, wow, there's like a whole world here. And why didn't I realize this, 10 years ago? Maybe I would have done something different, although I would never trade my prosecutorial years for anything. But some of the other stuff, maybe that's negotiable. So I parlayed that experience at Oasis to go to the Office of the Medicaid Inspector General, which had been newly created by Governor Pataki, because the feds, they pay approximately 50% of every dollar that the state spends in Medicaid. They said, you know what, you guys have to do a little bit better when it comes to fighting fraud, waste, and abuse. And you need to have an IG model. You need to have a Medicaid Inspector General. So that was set up, and it was exciting to set up a state agency with people that quickly we all became friends with one another. We worked around the clock, and we created this entity, which I've spent the better part of my career at O'Connell and Arano. It's fighting. And it was interesting. I would be introduced to provider groups as David used to work for the dark side. That was how I was introduced, as if it were a Star Wars movie. And I would just say, well, dark it's all relative, right? I know I'm on the bright side now. It's not dark here. But that's the perception of a lot of government regulation. I mean, sometimes it's very burdensome. And you have to navigate through that system for your client. And you don't want them to hate you, as you point out, all the things that they need to have been doing but have not been doing. And it's a partnership. But it seems like every year, more and more regulations, more and more requirements, more and more standards, more documentation issues. And the common complaint is I don't have enough time to provide healthcare services. I'm too busy documenting everything. It's like, well, that's the decision you made when you decided to be a healthcare provider. That's the flip side of the coin. So that experience at the state governmental level, and I recommend it to anyone. If you can get a job like that, you don't have to spend your whole career there, but they're tremendously eye-opening experiences, and I really suggest that to everyone.
Thank you all. Do we have any questions now? Otherwise, I'll keep going and we can take questions at the end. All right, the next question is, some of you answered a little bit of this when you answered the last question, but I want to ask, what advice would you give a current law student interested in pursuing a career in health law? In other words, what should they be doing now while in law school? So examples would be internships, classes, summer positions. What would you recommend? And we'll start with Wahida.
Okay. While you're currently in law school, I would recommend getting practical experience in addition to learning the law and the theory side of it all, because once you go out there, whatever it is, in a volunteer form or just even sitting in and observing a clinic and seeing the day-to-day interactions, it is so different when you go out and actually start to do the work and you're trying to remember certain things. There have been times where I actually did go back to my I don't even remember. I remember I had issues trying to figure out the password to my old PC that I used in law school because it was from a healthcare course on ERISA. And I was like, I know she said some things on it. But besides that, that was probably the only time I went back to my class notes ever in the healthcare setting. We've got Westlaw and all these other systems, but the teachers and professors at the school have some awesome tidbits from their practical experience and what they've observed. So I was trying to pick up on a lot of that. But the practical thing is absolutely necessary. I volunteered post law school. During law school, I did other things also, but it was not related to health law. It was more nonprofit type of work. But after law school, when I was trying to figure out, do I really want to go into this health tech field? Am I taking too much of a risk? Should I go back? Because I went to school when the economy tanked in 2008. And I'm like, my loans, I remember the federal interest rate was 10.6%. It was like, this is insane. So do I take this risk and volunteer at these other places? So I volunteered at a federally qualified health center. I also worked on certain cases on a contract perspective with the EEOC on various medical disability issues. And that gave me different kinds of exposure, and it helped me narrow down what I wanted to do. So whatever area you do end up working in, it's going to be work. It's going to be busy. It's all about digging in and trying to figure it out. You're going to see lots of mini worlds in every aspect of healthcare, which is what I keep finding. I think it's like, oh, this is a small niche. And then I find out it's like an entire universe and there's so many other people like that. So you'll figure it out. You'll doubt yourself possibly at times. I know I have, even sometimes like yesterday, I was like, what am I doing? But you'll figure it out. And I think the practical experience will help you and help ground you as well when it comes to applying the theory and figuring out solutionizing things and problem solving, because that's what you're really going to be doing for all of your clients, for yourself, for your businesses, is problem solving and coming to a solution and helping them move forward.
Thank you. Daniel?
Sure. I think when I was in law school, and I use it still today, go find the website called Lexology, lexology.com. On there, you will find postings made by lawyers at thousands of firms, or maybe they're not, several hundred firms, usually the big ones, and they will post on relevant topics in healthcare. I would read it. I found it interesting. It helped me identify what I wanted to do. When I graduated law school, I actually didn't have a job. I took 2 bar exams. I took them, I first did New York, then I did Connecticut. got involved in the Connecticut Bar Association. I also have a master's degree in bioethics, and I got myself on some ethics committees and at hospitals and institutional review boards. And I use Lexology. I was trying to figure out what I want to do. And I slowly started interacting with people in who had more hands-on exposure to articles that I had read. And I would call them up and I would meet with them for lunch, and I would just enjoy getting to know what they do because I didn't have a job. I had some time to figure it out. Yeah, and once you start thinking, figure out what excites you and what doesn't, then you can start, focusing your time. Now, this is assuming you don't have a job upon graduation. At least I didn't. If you do, then keep your head down, do your work, and always ask questions, and always, be willing to try to take on new work. Until you rise up to I guess a senior level, associate level, or the top, your role is to make your more senior, make the people you work with, make their jobs easier. And in order to make it easier, you gotta keep that head down and just try.
Thank you. Pooja?
Yeah, so everybody's given great advice so far. I would just add to that, try to get as much experience as you can with internships and field placements. I know with COVID, things are probably a bit different now, but say you have your mind set on one specific type of health law, and you get there and you do your internship and you're like, I can't do this. Don't just give up on a health law. There's so many other types of areas within health law that you might find interesting that you didn't even think about. Also, again, with COVID, I don't know how things are going on right now, but when I was in law school, I attended almost all the networking events that the Career Center put on. And honestly, those like short interactions with people who are already in the field opened my eyes up to just all the different possibilities that there are. Obviously, I don't know how they're doing it now. You can't meet people in person anymore. So if there's like Zoom networking events, things like that, I would try to attend those. Another thing I would say is with the Bar Association, if you can join, like I know there's like a student membership, and you can pick like fields within it. I would definitely become a part of the health law one for that.
Thank you, Pooja. And David?
Hi. So I think the best way, if your long-term goal is to get a job with a firm that does health law, you want to try to get some sort of a clerkship summer during the school, like Jessica and Colleen have. And then you get to look at them and they get to look at you, and you see whether the kind of work that the firm does is something you want to do or not. And then we get a chance to look and say, is this somebody that we want to have long term? So it's like an interview that never ends. It's good for us. It's probably more stressful for the law clerks, but pretty quickly you get a feel about whether you fit in or you don't fit in. Maybe you want to fit in, or you don't fit in and you don't want to fit in. And this can only come from experience and talking to your friends and colleagues and trying other firms. If you think that might help. I mean, firms have different reputations. Some are more higher pressure than others. And the people that wherever they are on the pressure scale, it's that way because that's how they want it, for good or for bad. And you'll pretty quickly realize, combining all your experiences, internships, what your friends say, you'll have a sharper focus about what you might want to do. Now you may graduate and not have a job at all. And I was in the situation that Dan was in. And it took me quite a while to find a job. And my first job was an assistant public defender. So at least I was doing criminal law. I mean, I didn't want to be on that side. But the beauty of being on the side that you think you don't want to be on is that you learn how that side thinks. And you become much more effective as an attorney. You can predict the arguments, what they're going to say to the judge at the conference. You know, what would you say if you were in their shoes? Well, you were in their shoes just a couple of years ago. So you'll understand the mindset. They'll understand that you understand. You resolve cases quicker. Everybody seems to be happier. But you have to be patient. Like, you can't always get to your end game as quickly as you want to get. And of course, you know, we all have student loans, and they seem to be, you know, into perpetuity. But they are what they are. That's what has happened with the cost of legal education. So it's a sunk cost. You might as well proceed in the best way that you can for yourself, and let those chips fall where they may. And if you have to take a job that doesn't pay nearly what you thought it would pay, well, you don't have to be there forever. But again, you don't want to sort of jump around too often, too early in your career either. You may want to write articles for blogs. Maybe you can get something published on Lexology. I don't know what the requirements are, but the local bar associations have newsletters. You know, we have some of our associates write articles for the Albany County Bar Association. And, you know, there's a lot of demand for information about what's going on in health law. So there are those avenues, you know, to get your name out. And, you know, networking these days is completely different than what it used to be. I mean, you're not going to a bar and buying somebody a drink. I mean, those days are on hold for now. So you're going to have to do it, you know, in other ways. It's very competitive. I'll just say this, and we get a lot of cover letters from folks that say they want to be healthcare lawyers, and they talk about things like healthcare proxies. And well, those things are great, but that's not something that we do when we represent providers. Like, we are all about that provider's, you know, needs and problems. And while it's health law related, that's really not, you know, kind of the foot you want to put forward first. So I guess I'll end with that.
Thank you. So the next question that I had was on actually what kinds of opportunities students should take advantage of when they're looking for a job. And several of you already talked about networking opportunities, but I was wondering if we could focus even more on that issue, like how to take advantage of networking opportunities or other things that student might do in order to help themselves get a job in the health care field. And also, I keep going to Wahida first, who never has a chance to get her thoughts together. So I thought this time maybe we'll start with Daniel.
All right, hold on. I gotta actually wait. Can you say the question again?
Yeah. So a lot of some of the students here are 3Ls or 2Ls who are looking for summer internships. And I was wondering, I know many of you have already discussed networking events that students should take advantage of, but I wanted now for you to focus more specifically on what students could do to find themselves a career in health law. In other words, if they're applying for jobs, what do you think that they should do in order to further, right, their chances of getting a job in the health law field?
Still confused.
Well, so for example, they should attend networking events, right? So they could ask questions, or they might find themselves a mentor. Also, I got a question in the chat. I got a question in the chat about whether you know, how they could find somebody who could give them advice in that field. And actually the question says, would any of you be willing to be mentors to students who want advice about particular legal jobs? And we always have Joanne, who's fantastic, right? So anyway, does that clarify what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so. Okay. Let's see. you touched on one thing. Having a mentor in this space, in this arena, is really important. I think at the first 4 years outside of law school, I think I had like 8 mentors. Now I have it boiled down to like 2, but I went about it a different way. Someone taught me how to do an elevator pitch. Spend 20 seconds, and it takes hours to come up with your 20-second pitch, but figure out a way to introduce yourself, tell them who you are and what you want, and what you hope to gather for them. I think when I was graduating law school, my elevator pitch was, "Hi, I'm Dan Lindenberg. I have a master's in bioethics. I concentrated in healthcare law, and I'm genuinely interested in becoming a healthcare lawyer. Can I take a few minutes of your time to learn how you developed your career?" I think that's what I did. I even put it into emails, and I went on LinkedIn, and I just looked at where they worked and who, and if we are a first or a second or a third connection, I would reach out. And I ended up having over 100 informational interviews when I graduated law school. And I interviewed at the biggest of firms and got to second and third round interviews with them, just simply by opening the door through an elevator pitch. Yes, networking events are good. They give you immediate access to people, but eventually you're going to have to go out and find that person. If the person that you're looking for wasn't at the event you were hoping to meet them at, and being good at elevator pitches has worked amazing for me. So, 2 years ago, the former CEO of the Henry Ford Health System was speaking at the American Health Lawyers event. And I went and attended that event, and she spoke, and what she spoke about resonated with me, and I really wanted to meet her. I had no idea how I was going to meet her. There were 2,000 people at that event. I went to go get coffee, and I miraculously somehow crossed paths with her, and I had 30-second window to pitch her, and I did that, and I got her card, and she actually has been a mentor to me for the past 2 years, and I call her every 4 months just to update her on things that are going on with me and getting her perspective. As far as what else was there to that question? What else? Evelyn, Professor.
That was terrific. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'd like to say too that my first job, the lawyer who hired me for my first job while I was in law school, my first summer job, I called him the guardian angel of my career, right? Because throughout my entire career, whenever I had to make decisions, I always bounced things off him, and he and his wife are still good friends of mine. So it's very helpful to have a mentor. The only thing I would add, Daniel, would how students could find themselves a mentor now.
To find yourself, a mentor is someone who wants to take stock in you, wants to take some time to nurture your experience. Most attorneys that I meet are genuinely interested in paying it forward. I guess the people that have become my mentors are people, we have it's all about earning trust. I find that if you can connect on a level outside of your professional interests, your relationship with them will build quicker. Many of my mentors, I got big into deep sea fishing. I got big into cardio boxing. I big into hiking, and we would connect on a job related aspect, and we would go off on tangents and talk about it. And that kind of solidified the relationship to say, hey, we connect on a personal level. I want to actually now figure out how to build your career. And I think that's what worked for me. Another easier way of doing this is just working with Joanne Casey, working with other people in career services, and figuring out alumni. Look for someone who's been at a minimum 5 years out, I would say, because chances are they've been through the trenches, and they can give you experience, give you suggestions on how to navigate or who to speak to launch your career.
Thank you. That's very helpful. David, you want to go?
Sure. I mean, one of the things of being in private practice is this elevator speech. I mean, it's so critical because you never know where you're going to be or who's going to be in that elevator with you. And of course, now no one is in the elevator with you, but the time when everyone rode elevators, you know, I would hammer out something like, "Oh, what do you do in this? What do you do in this building?" "Oh, I'm a healthcare lawyer." "What's that?" "Oh, I help healthcare providers keep the money that they earn for the services they provide and keep them out of jail." That's it. Now, it took me, I don't know, probably 3 weeks to come up with that. But the idea is now the next time that person sees me, that's the healthcare lawyer that keeps people out of jail. That's what goes through their mind. If I've made any impression at all, hopefully I have. And that's how you can get a referral now. And I mean, that lawyer might have been a real estate lawyer and he might have a doctor as a client and the doctor has no idea who to go to. And when you give that elevator speech 700 or 800 times over the course of a few years, you're going to get referrals. I mean, it's going to be a low percentage, but you're going to get some. So everything is marketing yourself, marketing your firm, your skills, being personable, the whole thing. As far as finding mentors, I mean, I'm happy to try to help anybody on the panel if they want to have a conversation, you know, offline. But it's the easiest way to do that is probably to target some firms, go to their website, see who the health law partners are, and shoot them an email and say, "Hey, I'm interested in health law. This isn't about whether you have an opening or not. I just wanted to talk to you about your practice areas. You know, I'm local. Maybe we could, you know, in the COVID world, everything is difficult, but, you know, you would just like to sit down with them over a drink or coffee. And, you know, you do that enough times. Now, I mean, Daniel said he had over 100 of these informational interviews. I mean, that's amazing. It takes a lot of energy and commitment. And, you know, I was unemployed when I got out of law school. So you have a lot of energy and you really want to get that job you went to school for. So it's how hard you're willing to work is going to determine how quickly you get that job, or something may just fall into your lap. But more often than not, in a bad market, you've got to go out and make that opportunity, you know, happen for yourself. Career planning, you know, our firm probably wouldn't, you know, put out a notice to the world without going to career planning first and saying, "Hey, we're looking for an associate." Like we would probably go to career planning first, as opposed to just shooting out some solicitation. We don't really know who's getting it or where it's going or whatever. Or we would do NISBA at the same time. But, you know, most of the lawyers in my firm are Albany Law School graduates, and that's a bond that, you know, people on the outside can't compete with necessarily. So, you know, if somebody shot me an email and it said, "Hey, I'm a 2L at Syracuse, can I talk to you about health law?" versus, you know, one of you folks, "I'm a 2L at Albany." "Oh, let's talk about Albany Law School." You know, you already have something in common. And I think you're more likely to connect with that person. But again, I've only had a few emails like this in the last dozen or so years. I think one was from Dan, come to think of it, and it led to some interviews, right? So
Yeah.
the more rocks you turn over, the better off you are. I mean, people are generally not going to come looking for you because they don't know about you. So you got to get out there. And networking, we tell all our associates, you got to get out there. You got to get out there. But now, you know, until this crisis, you know, subsides, we don't say that because no one's going anywhere. But I would give different advice if we weren't in this present situation. You got to get out there and you got to talk to people. You got to go to events and just meet people. And it's tough. It's tough if you're not, you know, straight lined up with a job out of graduation. You got to work for it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Joanne, I just wanted to ask you a question because I think it might be helpful to the students. I think if they need help interviewing, the placement office gives them some help also, right? Am I wrong?
100%. Nope, you're absolutely right, Professor Tenenbaum. We offer mock interviews, and help with the elevator speech and the informational interviews. And we're doing it virtually now because interviews are virtually. So we're doing a lot of mock interviews through Zoom, which really helps prepare the students as they head into the interviews. So, and then on a completely side note, David, I just want to tell you too that the career office, we value our relationship with O'Connell and Aronowitz, and they are always a phone call away. And I know Danielle's not with us today, but I think I have her on speed dial.
Sure.
And, eventually she's going to block my calls, I think.
She's our #1 recruiter.
So thank you very much. You know, we're running out of time, so I want to make sure that nobody has any questions. Are there any questions? All right, Wahida, then I'll go to you.
All right, I was talking to myself like Daniel was earlier. Okay, so when I was in law school, as well as after, I was trying hard to find a mentor. So, and my goal was really to find someone who looked like me, who kind of had it all. Also, I was like, I want someone who was a woman, who could also have a family, who didn't follow such a direct path, perhaps straight from college to law school, because I took almost 10 years gap, but also approachable. And I couldn't find that person, at least not at that time in the industry. Now there's a lot more changes. And as I look through these screens, it's awesome to see the diversity of the students here. It's fantastic, especially in the healthcare, those who are interested in healthcare, because even now I look at my colleagues, and I say this all the time to my guys, and it's literally all guys I work with at a management level. We need more women here. and they're like, yes, the next person's gonna be a woman. And then I look at all the resumes and I'm like, I don't see a single female, but we're gonna hire based on merit. So, okay. So I couldn't find the mentor that I was looking for. And so people would connect me with people. And one happened to be a partner at a very renowned law firm in Long Island. And I still speak to her all the time. But when I told her I want to go into healthcare, she's like, well, the only way you could get into healthcare, since you don't have healthcare in your background, is to go to Harvard and get your master's in public health. And I was like, I have so much in debt. Now you want me to go to school again? And so from that, I took little bits and pieces of what she said, and I started to look into other things. And a lot of it was just observation of other lawyers, speaking to various other folks, not just in healthcare, but in other fields. My mentors, who I have a handful at least, come from different industries. Some are general counsel, one is a paralegal. That's how it is. It's a colleague. It doesn't even matter what age they are. It's just who can actually help you and help intrigue you and make the clockwork inside your head. For now, because it's a virtual setting, one of the things that I've noticed, because I was scrambling to get CLE courses towards my birthday, because that's usually the drop dead deadline, there's these virtual conferences right now, and they have student rates. You could probably attend virtual conferences that are for CLEs as a student and meet different types of individuals and hear about different industries or different aspects of healthcare, and maybe reach out to those folks. I don't always recommend it, but if there's some kind of interaction and they're open to it, maybe even on those panels, you could definitely do that, because everyone is quite busy. You just don't know how things are. And in the COVID world, there's family, children, you're in your own, this isolated space oftentimes, plus there's a work thing. So time is of essence. A mentorship is bi-directional, so remember that. So it requires work on the student as well as on the mentor. I do mentor people. I also, at every organization that I've worked at, I've also hired people. One of the other ways to actually get into healthcare, which as a healthcare startup attorney, and knowing that there's limited funds, going to startups and asking, do you have an opportunity or internship? Because lawyers like me, I usually bring on 4 or 5 interns to get the work done because I can't do it. And the legal bills are going to be way too high out of my budget. But I know the students are going to be able to research a certain type of OIG opinion for me and give me some interpretation. And then we'll have a discussion and then we'll apply it. And then I could tell the business how to do this and go forward. So that's another little bit of a tip.
Thank you very much. So, whoops. I lost everyone. Here we go. Thank you. Pooja, I don't think we're going to have time. So right now, so I'm going to end this. I'm I'm going to end the session, but actually I have a meeting after this, so I can't stay very long. But if some of you would like to ask questions, I'll stick around for a little while, and any of our panelists who have time, I invite you to stick around, and any students who might want to ask questions on a more informal basis. Thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate your time very much. Jessica, did you have anything you want to add?
I just want to echo that. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Professor Tenenbaum, for moderating. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. Feel free to email me if you have any questions as well.